Good evening, and welcome to Ignite, our local weekly faith-based podcast. Unfortunately, I think I may be having a little bit of technical difficulties, but no worry, we'll still get through the night. I want to take this opportunity to ask that you like and share, both like and share, because we will have a awesome conversation with a dear friend of mine. And I promise you, it will not. This tonight's interview will not disappoint. So I want to bring on Pastor Kyle.
Hello, hello.
How's things going in your neck of the woods?
Pretty good. Yeah, we're doing all
Pretty
right
good.
here.
And now our own Kai Green.
Look at
Hey,
that
what's
shirt.
up, everybody? You all will notice Robert is not here, so take a big sigh of relief. The show is going to be awesome. I do want to remind you, if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, make sure you share, like, comment, all that good stuff. Make sure that we get some more people to tune in tonight. As always, we always say that we have an amazing guest, but we have an amazing guest again tonight. If it's a friend of Pastor Yolanda, they got to be awesome. I don't know if they'll give us any of this action tonight, but we're going to have a good show for you guys. So make sure you like, follow, and let's get ready to have a great conversation. St. Mark and Friends.
So, just a few announcements. I don't know if either of you have any, but I do want to encourage you guys to stay connected. Are still gearing up for our Father's Day celebration, where our guest for the day, our minister for the day, bringing the word, will be Minister Norris Henderson. And I wish I had the flyer for it, but he is the spouse of our own Minister Lisa McDaniel Henderson. So if you've met him, you know that there will be a strong, powerful word from the Lord. But we want to ensure that we have the opportunity to love on the men of our community. And I'm dancing in back and forth in between this light, Kai. Um, a lot of times I think that we celebrate mothers. We cherish the memories that they provide for us, but a lot of times men get left out. So we want to do our best to love on the men of our community. You'll hear from our guest as we bring him on just a little bit about his opportunities being a father. And I do say opportunities as being a father because it's a gift. And all that it brings to you, all that you take from it, it's an opportunity. Some people miss out on it. Some people miss the mark on what you have to give a child, someone else's child, as a mentor or a grandparent or whatever, however you've been, whatever title you may share. But we want to make sure that we love our men during this season. So without further ado, I want to bring on my dear friend, um, keeper of my secrets. He knows where the bodies are buried. I've heard him tell a couple of people. We've gotten lots of good trouble together. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let me bring on my brother, Kevin Sylvester Harrison. And I put a little respect on his name. That's Dr. Kevin Sylvester Harrison. He earned
And,
that. So I
and you
want
put
to,
my middle name on there too. I didn't type my middle name on there. You did that.
you are the one that you change names in the middle of presentations. That's not me. So I'm going to read his bio and then I'll tell you from my heart who this man is and who he has been in our community. I could talk about him all night long and I wouldn't repeat the same thing twice. But his bio says that Kevin Sylvester Harrison, EDD, serves in the dual roles of Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion and Assistant Teaching Professor for the Cohen Honors College at Wichita State University. In addition to being an educator, Dr. Harrison also works as a consultant, public speaker, workshop facilitator, and he is the author of the sports biography One and Done, the Corleone Young Story. That is just a small piece of who Kevin Harrison is. He is a singer. He is a songwriter. He is an amazing father. He is amazing father to Ashley, more importantly. It's not just the opportunities that he's gotten because he's Ashley's father, right? He probably wouldn't have had those opportunities if he hadn't had that specific child. He is the son of Jim and Claudette Harrison. And I tell you, he is a community advocate. He is an artist, all around artist. He writes plays, he conducts bands, you name it, he does it. Most importantly, the brother is real. You never have to guess what he's actually said, what he's thinking, and he has this amazing way of articulating it to where it sticks to you. So I just appreciate him. I love him. He's been there for me. You know, there are times where you're in a hospital room all by yourself and no one shows up, and you open your eyes and he's sitting next to the bed. So he is an unsung hero that most people don't realize he does those things behind the scenes, but I cannot say enough about him. I love you and welcome to Ignite.
Thanks. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
I've been waiting for this interview. So tell us, we did send you some questions, but we'll probably go off script. Don't tell all the secrets. Let's try and keep some of those things hidden. But just tell us a bit about the day in the life of Kevin Harrison.
Oh, well, I think the most exciting thing that I have going on in my life right now is I'll be a grandfather on July 18th.
Wow.
And it's a boy, and I'm speaking NBA into existence. I know I should probably be speaking things like Harvard into existence, but I guess I'm shallow. I'm speaking lotto pick NBA into existence. In addition to that, the mother of my grandchild and I, we have a lot of conversations. And it's my only child, Ashley, that Yolanda mentioned. We have a lot of conversations. And one of the conversations that we recently had, I talked about my first introduction to racism. I didn't know that it existed. I didn't know that people looked at me and saw that I looked different than them and treated me differently accordingly until my first day of kindergarten. And it shocked me. I wasn't ready for it. And so my parents understood racism one way. They understood, you know, the segregation and the Jim Crow and those type of things. But there was a new type of subtle racism that would be attacking this 5-year-old kid through K-12. And my parents weren't familiar with it because it was new. And so my daughter and I talked about that, and we developed a children's book. It's done. We should be putting it out sometime next month, but it's called Malik's World. And so it's designed to help parents who also probably don't understand microaggressions and kids understand what type of attacks a student of color may be going through in the in the K-12 schooling pipeline. And so that's a project that we're working on. And then in addition to that, just teaching at school, I'm excited about all of the classes I teach, but the one I'll speak to you about today is a class called Black Lives Matter. We piloted it last semester, and it went well with only a few students, and it was pretty popular. So we have a full class coming up in the fall semester for that course. We don't really look at the movement. We like the statement because Black lives do matter, and so we look at all types of things. We look at the contributions to the arts and to the sciences. We look at great Black inventors, and a lot of people don't realize, but you can't go a day without seeing Black inventions. If you stopped at a stoplight, ate a potato chip, and set your home security system, then you've got 3 Black inventions right there. If you got an automatic transmission in your car, I mean, I can go on and on, open heart surgeries, blood transfusions. And so we talk about those things because going back to K-12, we don't talk about those things in K-12. Something as simple as every student learning that Edison created the light bulb, but no student learning that it doesn't work without the carbon filament that's created by Lewis Latimer. If I'm a Black kid or a student of color, not necessarily Black, and I see myself in the curriculum as something significant, that will empower me. And so many students go through the disservice of not being empowered by those stories. And so the children's book, and almost everything that I try to do speaks to those type of things, try to bring light to dark places through just really giving people information that they don't have and getting people to understand their place in history. So that's me.
Wow.
So tell me, you tell an amazing story about when did you learn that you were smart?
I don't still know that I'm smart, but I'm gonna rephrase the question. You caught me off guard with that one.
Were you always a good student? Did you always
No.
have great grades?
No, I was a terrible student up until probably about the 7th grade. But I think I got discouraged really quickly. And so my daughter, who has taught kindergarten and third grade for several years, she's on to a different career now. But we talk about the education system a lot, and I imagine and I believe that it's a lot better now because I see programs and supports that exist now that didn't exist when I was in school. But looking now at 53-year-old, back at some of the things I went through at 10, I mean, I was really under attack. And at 10 years old, you don't have the cognitive maturity to compete with an adult that's attacking you based off of nothing more than some biases that are deeply rooted with inside this adult's uh, mainframe from whatever circles of influence that they've been in, from whatever miseducation and misbeliefs that they have. Um, a 10-year-old kid is no competition for a 25, 30, 40-year-old teacher. So being under that constant attack, I think I just kind of rebelled in my own way. I'll just tell you one quick story. I don't want to bore you to death, but fourth grade, I knew that I should have been, I'll tell you the name of the reading book. I knew I should have been in Serendipity. That was the top reading book. And they didn't put me in Serendipity. They put me in Tapestry, which was the next lower reading book. And I just asked a simple question, because the previous year I got an A in reading and I was in the top reading book. So why am I didn't get an A in everything. I wasn't a good student, but I did get an A in reading. So I asked my teacher, why am I in Tapestry instead of Serendipity? And, sit down, shut up. It's pretty much what I was told. So I did. I sit down and I shut up and I waited until she went to the teacher's lounge or wherever she disappeared to. And I went to her desk and I pulled out her red grading pen and I started on page 1 and I wrote zeros all the way to the end. And when she came back, I said, I'm done with reading for this 9 weeks. I did this last year. I'm not doing it this year. Wasn't the healthiest way to handle it, but you're a 10-year-old, you know something's not right, and you're fighting these battles not knowing how to fight them, and kids shouldn't have to go through that, which is partially why we're writing that book. But it wasn't that I wasn't capable of learning, and I say that because so many kids who look like me probably have similar stories. Right now, when you take a look at things like overrepresentation in special ed, underrepresentation in advanced placement, expulsion rates, suspension rates, dropout rates, behind grade level, a lot of times 3 years, 4 years behind grade level in reading and math. We know, at least I hope that we all know, that it's not because Black kids and Hispanic kids are less intelligent than our white counterparts. It's not the case. So something else must be happening. Well, I'm a living witness. I've lived through that something else that was happening. And so the numbers haven't changed. So that means maybe it's not as blatant, but without a question, a lot of it still exists. There's no doubt in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
So with that said, tell us, and I'm trying to change this out. I want more of you on here than me. Tell us a bit about the group. You help mentor a group of young men at Wichita State. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's through Dr. Marche Fleming Randall's office, and it's called the Tenacious Men. We've been doing it for a while. We did it a few years back with a cohort of freshmen, and we did 4 years with those freshmen. So we followed them 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. And with that particular group, the focus was more on mentorship and then just teaching skills that they might have missed out on. Basic things, firm handshake. Hopefully, in this age of social distancing, that still has value. How to tie a tie, how to prepare yourself for a job interview. And we put them around positive role models in the community, role models that, had similar experiences, whether it be the same ethnicity, similar socioeconomic backgrounds that they come from. And they were able to spend time with these young men and really kind of develop a relationship and kind of help these young men achieve their academic goals and then even set some goals that, hopefully they're pursuing post high school. When we finished that group, they graduated. We started again 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th. We had those young men for 4 years, and it was 10 of them. We called it the Tenacious 10. So we went out to try to do it again, but we kind of revamped it. And this time we wanted third grade. Nothing against the older young men, but we thought, you know what, maybe if we catch them at a younger age, we can be more impactful. So right now we're in the process of going into our third year with those young men. We changed the name from Tenacious 10 to Tenacious Men because we ended up with 13 of them. So we had them in the third and the fourth, and then we'll be going into their fifth grade cohort year once the fall semester starts, because we do all of the events, most of the events. We do field trips, but we do most of the events on campus. We have a couple of engineering students that come and volunteer with us, and the focus is about 60% STEM this time, really trying to get these students acclimated and excited about STEM. Now, they already do math in school, so we don't spend time making them go to school on Saturdays because we meet a couple Saturdays a month. But what we do is we try to get them excited about math by doing experiments. We did rockets. We shot rockets up in the air, and then we studied what makes rockets go in the air. And we let them know, if you're excited about this, you should be excited about math. We made volcanoes. We took a field trip to a science fair downtown. We do things like that. So it's 60% that. The other 40% is the multimedia piece, because this is a digital age. And so, obviously they grew up on digital things. So we need those bells and whistles because we want to meet students where they are. So we need to use those bells and whistles that they're familiar with. So we put cameras in their hands and they're filming and things of that nature. So they wrote a script, and the script is called Trapped Inside a Video Game. And the plan is to film the movie, about a 30-minute movie. The plan is to film it. They'll film it. They'll edit it. And Mr. Bray, Devon Bray, is going to assist those. He comes and volunteers. He's going to assist them getting that done in the fall. But it's called Trapped Inside a Video Game. So again, they rehearsed and they've written it and they know their parts. And so hopefully they remember them when we reconvene in the fall.
Is that something that is just open to any of the kids that want to, or are they selected, or how do they get into the program?
Yeah, good question. So it's financed by Textron. So it's actually called the Textron Tenacious Men. And again, it's through Dr. Fleming Randall's office. And what we did is we wanted to connect with schools in the community. So when we started with the third grade, we decided let's do some public schools and let's do some of the private schools. So we reached out to Dr. Thompson and Dr. Polite at USD 259. And so they connected us with Mueller and Isley and Spate. And then we reached out to Dr. Shropshire at Holy Savior and Bishop Moore at Urban Prep. And so we have students from those 5 schools, but we're not opposed to taking additional students. In fact, we added a student because one of the young men has a brother same age as him, and he he's coming back excited about the things we're doing. And so the mom called and said, hey, my other son would like to be, involved in what you guys do. Is that okay? And so, so we added the kids. So we're not just closed. They have to meet certain expectations. I mean, they don't have to meet any type of academic expectations, but at the same time, they have to understand that they're not coming here to be babysit. Yeah, they're kids. So from time to time, we might have a little issue from time to time, but I'm not chasing you all over campus. You need to understand that, and the parents need to understand that. So that expectation, you can't just drop them off without setting that expectation. But yeah, we're open to taking additional students. Absolutely.
Kai, I'll give you the next question.
I'm sorry, what?
I'm going to have Kai ask you the next question.
Oh, okay.
Right. So, I mean, I really like the work around the mentoring and definitely understanding how you can pull the kids together, maybe put some equipment in their hands, expose them to new tools and ways to tell their story, and be able to do that type of work in the community. I am curious, does the program also have like any type of character development type component to it, or or is it just more so kind of ad hoc, right, as they're spending time with the mentors that just kind of bubbles up naturally?
It's so funny that you say that. Yes, we do have some character development, and you may be able to help me out, or someone listening to this podcast might be able to help me out. We're looking for someone who is able to teach them coding. So this is what we've done so far. They have created an avatar of themselves. These are my super qualities. These make me a superhero. No, you're not going to be able to fly. No, you're not going to be able to swim like Aquaman. However, you have some qualities that make you a superhero. So let's identify those qualities. Let's draw you, and let's draw a picture of ourselves, and let's list out what those qualities are and why those qualities are important. So yeah, we actually character development in the form of actually creating a character so that they can look at this creation that they created, this cartoon that they created, and they can see a positive reflection of themselves. The ideal situation and what we hope to do, and we've been having a little difficulty finding someone to teach them coding, is to actually take this picture that they have drawn and maybe just learn some basic coding that would kind of teach them how to create a digital image of this avatar that they've created of themselves.
Excellent. You and I probably should have a conversation. So my formal training is IT. I'm now in diversity, equity, and inclusion, but my formal training is IT. So I used to have a graphic design business. I used to code, and I know people in that world. So I'd be glad to take a look at some of my contacts and maybe connect you all. They might be able to help in that area. I think that is I think it's a really good idea. I'd love to be able to help out in any way.
Absolutely, I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So, in saying that, I guess we'll pivot the conversation a little bit. I'm looking at the discussion map over here. We've got you on tonight. We're talking faith, fatherhood, and freedom. For those who may not know, we are in June. Juneteenth is right around the corner. So, some of the questions we have tonight just kind of explore the intersection of our society and faith and how those things come together. So, pivoting a little bit here, my next question is, what are your thoughts on the role of faith in public life? And do you think the church is effectively living out that role?
That's a good question. My thoughts on faith in public life. I mean, obviously, faith is important. Mm-hmm. And I mean, let me kind of, I guess it'll be better for me to just tell a personal story. I think that'll be the best way for me to answer this question.
Excellent.
Without a doubt, faith is important in public life. I feel like if you don't have faith, I won't say that you don't have anything, but I'll say you don't have much. Faith to me is actually witnessing and experiencing miracles. Sometimes a miracle just as common, not as small, because it's not a small miracle, but as common as holding a newborn baby, as miraculous as seeing both of my parents beat cancer, as amazing as living and breathing conversations with my great grandmother, who was the child of a slave. So you can't tell me slavery was too far ago to talk about, because I had living and breathing conversations with the child of a slave. But then miracles that defy the laws of physics. I tell the story. I was in a car. I'm in a heated argument with my girlfriend at the time. I was a young man. I was a little out of control. I thought I was invincible. I was doing about 80 miles an hour. And I was on a dirt road, and the car spun out of control. And I was spinning out of control. And the last thing I remember was I was sideways about to go into a tree on the side that the young lady was on. And in that split second, I didn't have anything I could do other than A, realize I had completely messed up, and B, brace myself for the impact. And I sit there, and there was never an impact. And I wasn't a great physics student, but I remember the first law of physics, the law of inertia. And that law tells me that car was supposed to wrap around that tree. There's no law of physics that explains why that car didn't wrap around that tree, but it didn't. So I get out the car, and I'm quiet, and I walk around slowly, and the distance between the car and the tree is probably that of a sewing needle. So when you speak about faith, I get excited because, I know God is real, and I've given you a few examples, but I could probably go on and on. As far as the church, is the church living that's a difficult question to answer, because that answer is probably going to be yes and no.
Yes.
I don't think there are any two pastors that are created equally, and I don't think there are two churches created equally. And I don't know. I've been told that you shouldn't judge, but I don't listen, because I do judge. And so, and I think anybody with a conscience and anyone who is alert is probably going to judge to a certain degree. Mm-hmm. And my grandmother used to always say, well, you should respect the title and not the person. I love you, grandmother, rest in peace. But no, I have to see what the person is doing.
Right.
And maybe that person doesn't deserve to don that title. And so you have to be critical of those type of things, because if you're not, then you'll follow someone that's leading you the wrong direction. And so that said,
Yep.
There are some people of faith that are serious, that are doing God's work and leading people in the right direction without question. And I have some friends in the ministry who fit that bill. One of them is on this podcast. And however, and I won't say any names, but I've had conversations with individuals. I've watched actions of individuals who I felt like maybe they might be in this for the wrong reason. Maybe this was a career choice, or maybe you wanted to be famous, because there's a little prestige that comes with the title as well. And so I think in some spaces, the church is doing what it needs to do. I think in some spaces it's not. I think just like anything else. I mean, there's nothing perfect. There are people doing the right thing. There are people that are not doing the right thing. But I would never dare put the entire church in one boat of saying, yes, the church is doing the right thing, or no, the church is not. I think there's just too much going on. It's too complex.
Absolutely. And so I appreciate that. Right. And so not from the standpoint, oh, I'm somebody that, has faith in the church and all that, but from the standpoint to where, for a long time, just like you said, the idea of respecting the church, respecting the titles and things like that, sometimes stop us from being maybe more mindful, more thoughtful, more curious about how we could be living out our faith, how we could be driving impact in our church, and then also really just being open to understanding that maybe I'm not in the best place right now. Right. and then something different needs to happen. Number two, I want to pivot back to something you said, because I hope that people are listening are getting this. I love the way that you started to break down miracles. Right. You said there can be this like supernatural phenomena almost, but then there's these things also that are that maybe we would describe as common, right? So from holding a child in your hand to having a conversation with a relative or a loved one that has had such a historic life, really. So I want to ask a quick follow-up to that, is that, where would you attribute that perspective from of looking at miracles? To me, it's such a mature and a humbled way to look at miracles, but like kind of, what would you credit to helping you reach that perspective on what a miracle is?
I mean, I think to a certain degree, my upbringing, you learn a lot of things you learn in your home. Yeah. And then you get to a certain age where you may challenge some things that you learned at home. And so I would say 85% of my spiritual beliefs are right in line with my parents, and I think the other 15% drive them crazy. but my foundation, my base, it starts there. Yeah. And then from that, I think just the things I've experienced, like I said, that I'm 53, and I was probably 21 or 22 when that car incident happened. I promise you that happened. That's not the only time that happened. I have a similar incident with a motorcycle accident. And I'm flipped over the top. I never have ever worn a helmet because I had to be honest. I thought I was cute on my motorcycle, so I wanted to be seen. So I wouldn't wear a helmet. You can't see me in a helmet. If I'm smiling at women, they can't see me with the helmet on. Long time ago, but still. The only time I've owned a helmet, but the only time I ever have worn a helmet, the only one time I ever wore a helmet in my life was the time I had a motorcycle accident. That's not coincidence. Wow. Obviously, God had something else he wanted me to do. Probably about 8 feet in the air, and I'm coming down head first. And while I'm coming down, and I know this is happening fast, but I'm having time to stop and have clear thoughts. It's like a slow conversation. I'm like, okay, I'm going to be okay. The bike is going to be messed up. Good thing I have a helmet on. I see where I'm going to fall. I see how I'm going to fall. I'm going to hit the side of my head, but I'm going to be okay. The helmet's going to protect me. I'm going to roll over and I scar my arm. I had all of these thoughts in slow motion while this accident was going on, almost as if, I don't want to sound well, I'll just say it. I'm not sounding anyway. You take it for what it's worth. It was almost as if as if there were arms lifting me up and landing me safely so that I wouldn't be
Wow.
too injured. Damaged enough not to have a lesson to learn from whatever foolishness I was going through at that time, but at the same time, um, nothing life threatening,
Yeah.
no head trauma or anything of that nature. I think after a few situations like that, a 12 gauge, you wake up with a 12 gauge pressed to your face and you say the exact right things, as scared as you are, you don't have time to think, but the words come out of your mouth, the exact right words to de-escalate the situation. I could go on and on. It just started with my parents, and then in my own life, just seeing miracles. It's just faith is obvious. God is real. It's just obvious. I see that around me. I mean,
So take us to the word in that. Do you have a scripture that grounds you, a scripture that you that kind of guides you?
yeah, I do. My personal testimony as far as scriptures go, probably gonna be Ephesians 6, chapter 11, the whole armor of God. And the reason I say that is I've been protected, even when I didn't deserve to be protected, even when I was completely wrong, which goes back to somebody was praying for me, because during a lot of them times I wasn't praying for myself. You know, I was a reckless young man doing reckless things. I won't go into details, but my primary goal in life was to be, an entertainer. I wanted to be a rock star, and I was very close. But with that, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and I was good at all of them. And so, and so, just being honest. And so I was spiraling out of control. But at the same time, I had that whole armor of protection, and that's because someone else was praying for me. Grandmothers, which I was very fortunate. I grew up with two grandmothers and a great grandmother and both grandfathers, and had a good, strong church community at Grand Chapel, and a whole lot of people over there praying for me. And if Miss Jennings is on here, yeah, you were one of them. I don't know if she's on here or not, but I think she is. But a whole lot of people were praying for me. So, yeah, that's my story.
One thing you'd mentioned earlier about creating the avatars. I just wanted to, hit on that real quick. Is part of that process creating dignity for those students? I mean, when they're thinking about who they are, their giftedness, and kind of elevating their status in a way, is that something that gives dignity to them?
I think without a doubt it does. I mean, we have to, they're pretty young, so we have to do some other things to make it fun. We can't just sit and have those conversations all day, but
yeah.
You definitely want them to identify positive traits in themselves. Yeah. You definitely want them to see people who look like them, who have done amazing things. I talked to you a little bit about Lewis Latimer and his contribution to the light bulb. He also had a contribution to the telephone, Alexander Graham Bell's invention. Well, when I show kids that and they see that, they see someone looking like them, then when they go and design this avatar, they have a little bit more empowerment. They see themselves, and nothing against rappers and basketball players. I like basketball and rap, but at the same time, the Black experience and Black males' contribution to this country is far more wide-reaching than basketball and rap and singing and dancing and entertainment. Although those things are amazing, I do all of those things except basketball. I would love to do basketball. I'm just not very good at it. But our contributions to the arts, to the sciences, to invention, to innovation are just profound. And we have so many young men and women that don't know that. I mean, how many young women know that a Black woman invented the home security system, Marie Von Britton Brown? Very few. And so, they need to know that. They need to know their place in history. If you don't know your place in history, then you don't have the empowerment to really know what you're capable of. I don't think.
Right. I was going to say, as you were saying that too, I was thinking about a couple of scriptures came to mind, right? A people without a vision will perish. Mm-hmm. Write the vision, make it plain. It talks about these things. And so again, with the creation of the avatars, right? That is another way of like living out those scriptures. And I can't remember, guys, if it was last week we were talking on this podcast. And I share with you all something that one of my professors said. We were having this conversation about how do people keep coming up with these new sermons every Sunday and the pressure of trying to do that. And the professor said, don't worry about trying to be creative and innovative. He said, be faithful to the work. And he said, through the faithfulness, the innovation will come. So like even here, there's some people that probably go, well, I don't get why those kids on computers are making avatars or they, they're doing this with new technology and the new digital stuff. But you're just taking a medium. You're living out the same principles. You're just doing it through a different medium. Right. So by creating the avatars, giving them the opportunity to, one, reimagine themselves, and then be transformed by the renewing of their minds, right? To re-envision, to reimagine, to cultivate a healthier, brighter future for both themselves and the communities they find themselves in. So I love the idea. I love seeing, these scriptures really come alive in these creative and innovative ways. Yeah, for sure.
Well, and I love that too, that, I think kids get hammered in to themselves. You're not good enough. Here's where you're failing. Here's where you're failing. And here's an opportunity for them to think of their giftedness and what makes them unique or what makes them a child of God. Maybe you don't use that language, but, they're God's good creation.
Right.
And it does give them dignity. And that's.
And then you're introducing them to technology where the job market is growing, the future, and they're not represented. And that has to change. And so you're getting their hands on that technology early. I mean, especially now that Pastor Green's going to connect me with some coders.
So, Kevin, I want to take you back to fatherhood. Again, we talked about this being June 19th will be Father's Day. You coming into fatherhood changed all your plans. You had one or two choices. You want to tell us a little bit about the decisions that you made when you found out you were going to be a father?
Yeah, it was unplanned, but it was planned. I didn't plan it, right? But it definitely made me a better person. And so, I found out I was going to be a father, and I rejected it at first. They got rap songs about it. I think one of them called "That Baby Don't Look Like Me" or something like that. And so, I was that guy for a minute, and then, I finally had to sit down, and I had to make a choice. Around that time, I was offered a couple of record deals, and they were going to require me to leave. And I won't go into all the details, but based on the complexity of the situation, I really had to make a choice. I wasn't going to be able to do both. Maybe I could have done both later on, but at that particular time, I had to stay here and commit to fatherhood or leave, go on tour, record albums. And that's the only thing I've ever worked up to my whole life. That was my number one. I didn't have a backup plan. That was the front plan and the backup plan. And so now I had to switch gears. And I started thinking about this, and I'm 21, 22, 23, somewhere in there. I can't remember. But I remember the conversation I had with myself. I remember I was looking at one of my dad's shoes, and my dad has little feet. He wears 10 and a half. I wear 12. And I remember laughing. I remember thinking to myself, ha, 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 my dad sure got some little feet. Then I stopped and I thought about it. And I said, I wear 12 and he wears a 10. And there's no way I could ever feel his shoes. Couldn't even attempt to feel his shoes. And I'm like 22, 23 having this conversation with myself. And so I asked myself, so why can't you feel his shoes? The answer I gave myself is because you're trying to run from fatherhood. And I'm getting teary-eyed telling the story. So let me take a second here and catch myself, because men are tough. We don't cry. No, I'm just joking. But no. And I said, well, shoot, man, this guy has been there for you, even when you didn't deserve him to be, even when you were disrespectful. And bailed you out of situations that you got in, not because you weren't raised correctly, because you just were being just flat out dumb. And like I tell anybody now, if you see me doing something that's outstanding, don't give me credit. That's my parents. If it's something that man should do, a man should do, that's my dad and my spiritual upbringing. Don't give me credit. If you see me doing something foolish, which happens from time to time, less often now than in the past, but if you see me doing something foolish, I went rogue from the program. That's what it is. And so going back to the question, I hope I didn't deviate too far, but I felt like, you know, I have to contribute the same that was contributed to me. And I said, if I can be a half, even a third of the father that my dad was, I'll be a great father. And so I don't brag about it, but I'm not humble about it either. I'm an exceptional father. And it didn't start that way. But that conversation I had with myself, just kind of reflecting my own life and my own upbringing and my father's influence on me, had a lot to do with that. And his situation was different. He and my mother were married, and they raised me and my brother in the same household. Mine was a non-traditional situation. It was, I wasn't married to the mother of my child, and so sometime there was some friction and some other things that we had to work through. But at the end of the day, I think together we figured out a way to raise a very productive and amazing human being. And although we didn't always agree, didn't always get along, I think she was an amazing mother, and I think I was an amazing father. And so, yeah, parenthood in general, not just fatherhood, is something I don't take lightly. And that didn't come without some work and without some self-evaluation and really changing who I am. And so my daughter and I, we have a joke that we always say whenever she does something good, I say, "Ha ha, look what I made." And whenever I do something good, she says, "Ha ha, look what I made." Well, we know that God made both of us, so I wasn't meaning to offend church folk. It's just our inside joke.
You're
But
good.
at the end of the day, though, I mean, realistically, who's doing the teaching? If you see a parent holding a baby, are they teaching them how to be a baby, or is that kid teaching them how to be a parent? So realistically, if one of us made the other, she made me. Realistically, but don't tell her I said that, because I'm still going to continue to say it whenever she does something well.
Listen,
I want to pause in this moment because I think that in our community specifically, and I think across the world, when you see a black man and you automatically look at him for who he's supposed to be or who you think that he is, you don't fit the mold of who you turned out to be, right? So if I would have said, if I'd have put your picture up with your hat on and told your story, basketball player, drug dealer, entertainer, that probably would be what most people would think. But you didn't just give up a record deal. You're being extremely humble about that. You had a CD, you had a number one song on the radio at the time. It was no small feat for you to decide that I needed to step into these shoes and be a father. And I think that more men, not just African American men, because people walk away from that role of being a parent all the time, black, white, red, yellow, doesn't matter. But you're not just a father to Ashley. You are telling us that you're mentoring these young men and you're pouring into them in ways that they may not be being poured into in other ways. I know you to be the man that decides that if I can get a small grant, or even if I don't have any money, I'll be the man going around and mowing the yards of the seniors in our neighborhoods to ensure that they don't have to worry about how small things around their homes are actually going to get taken care of. You are a researcher, but more than just actually thinking about things, you always do what needs to be done to apply it, right? So with that, can you tell us, did the church at all help you with that, or how did we fail you in that aspect? Do you
Definitely did.
still think that we're failing the community overall, and how can we change that?
No, the church is not failing the community by any means. I mean, this. I mean, we got to go back. I mean, there is no Underground Railroad without the church. There's no civil rights movement without the church. So I would never say that the church has uh, has failed the community. Is the church as involved with the community and community initiatives as it once was? I don't think so. Um, is that 100% the church's fault? No, I don't necessarily think that's 100% the church's fault either. I mean, I know churches, mostly, not all of them, but most churches, at least the ones that I frequent and the one I grew up in and the other ones that I visited growing up, attendance is down. Congregations are really old, a lot older. There's not a whole lot of young blood coming into these churches. And so with that, I mean, the churches don't really have the strength that they once had. And so obviously you can't do what you used to do if you don't have the same type of resources and manpower and woman power, that you once had. As far as myself, though, I mean, you asked me, the things that I have done in the community that I do and continue to try to do. I always try to find positive projects. I would say that my passion for that started in the church, largely due to my mother. My mother was always putting some kind of program together, and every time God gave her a vision, it required that I work. Still to this day, I would like for God to give her some solo visions every now and then. But
she said the harvest is plenty, but the labor.
but I think there are some things that the church could do differently and better. But I definitely don't put the entire onus on the church by any means. I'll tell you some things that turned me off about the church. Is coming up. Some things that caused me to say at about age 16, when I get old enough to not go to church anymore, I'm not going to. And then when I turned 19, 20, I made good on that promise for many years. I can only speak for me. I can't speak for everybody. But I think one of the things that always kind of disturbed me is how critical sometimes the church can be of people. And the thing is, no matter what we are right now, that's not what we always were. And I say that for 100% of the world. Yet a lot of times a person will change and they'll try to get themselves right. And the biggest critics they have sometimes are in the church. I had a friend who was a huge drug dealer, and he gave all that up, and he joined church, and he, was wanting to get into ministry, and he was very sincere. But if he bought a pair of shoes that were pretty expensive, that's well. Did you see how expensive those shoes were? He still must be out there doing that, and he wasn't. That has a tendency to turn people off. At least it had a tendency to turn me off, as well as the friend that I'm referencing. I think sometimes we talk about of the world, things being of the world, and we neglect to see where faith and life intersect. And I think the bottom line is there needs to be a lot of interaction. I mean, first of all, the church is in the world. It's a big world. It's all part of the world. Now there are bad things and good things in the world, but if the church, and I'm not speaking about all churches and all church people, but I've seen situations where the church tries to isolate itself. Well, we're going to be over here. The world can be over here and do its thing, but I mean, is that what Jesus would have done? I don't think so. I think if Jesus was here right now, he would probably be, and I don't know this for a fact, but I think he would be where he would reach the people where he would need to reach. I think he'd be in the crack house and the dice house and all of the places where everything bad is happening. Those are the people he would be reaching out to. I think those are the type of people he reached out to last time he was here. So why would it be any different this time? And then some of the things are outside of the church's control. When you talk about systemic injustice, kind of going back to that scripture I talked about earlier in Ephesians, we don't wrestle against the flesh is what it says. And it says we wrestle against these dark forces of the world, depending on which version that you're looking at, but I'll just paraphrase it. But those dark forces of the world, in my opinion, are really systemic oppression, systemic racism. So you think about it, when you had the New Deal, mid-1930s, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, he creates this $200 billion inventory of houses. And home ownership is, number one wealth building mechanism in the country, but Black people don't get to participate in that. Now, 200 billion in 1935, 1937 is equivalent to about $3 trillion today. And with that, most of those churches were in those neighborhoods. And so those neighborhoods that were segregated didn't really have the resources. All of a sudden now that gentrification is coming, it's amazing how many resources are coming to those same neighborhoods. But that's a whole different story. But they didn't have the resources to really maintain a productive foundation to continue to support these churches, which I think is another reason, not the only reason, but I think is another reason why these churches have lost some of their strength. You used to have, a lot of really proud and dedicated, Black people in these communities, but those communities just really weren't sustainable to continue to have those type of people. I don't know. Something that Pastor Green said earlier, I want to touch on too, and I'll make this the last point I make on this. He talked about when we were talking about the kids and creating avatars, and he talked about having a vision and that giving the kids a vision. And so when you think about it, I think a church has to have a vision and they have to work the vision. And it's not just the pastor that works the vision, but at the same time, the pastor has to work the vision by more days than one, preaching on Sunday in the pulpit. I mean, that's definitely part of the job, but
Amen.
Being acclimated to the community. When you talk about vision, and I'm not the scripture quoting God by any means, but you just kind of threw me a couple lives, so I'm gonna go and swing at them. Matthew 5:13. I won't quote it word for word, but I know if salt loses its flavor, it's useless. Well, the church without a vision is about the same. It's about as useless as a salt without flavor. And so, if there's no vision, you can't control the systemic injustice, but you can control having a vision. And a lot of times you'd be surprised if you have a vision that you're really working, then I believe, back to faith, that vision is going to be anointed. And you're working that vision's anointed. Hey, there you go. Y'all are good. People are going to flock to that. I think outside of the church, they say if you build it, they will come. But I think if you build it, not only will they come, God will anoint it and bless it as well. But you got to build it.
Amen.
Can I have on that thought, Dr. Harrison. So, I love the way you put that. Having this vision, being able to share that story, being able to articulate it. I share this with people all the time. In the work of diversity, equity, and inclusion, man, there's so many different principles. There's different concepts that people have out there. But in my experience, where I've had the most success is by coming in, laying out that foundational story about this is what we want to accomplish. This is why we want to accomplish it. And then allowing people from that community that I'm working with, creating space for them to actually tell their story, their experience, what they went through, and then giving people space to actually have critical dialogue about it. So not only, like you said, are you painting that vision for people, but then you're giving them space to be critical. You're giving them space to push back. You're giving them space to grow. You're giving them space to not even be ready to make it to the end today, but to at least to start to engage in the work, right? And it sometimes I am floored by the depth of authenticity and the depth of conversation I can have around race in a corporate environment, but then the stifling environment that I go in when I go to work with people of faith to have deep conversations about the change they need to make, right? And I don't know what your experience is like in doing the DEI work and having those difficult conversations, but I have seen that simple concept of articulating a vision, pointing people towards it, and walking them through it that has been successful time and time again. And I always go back to that scripture. And I just think, God, if we work this principle, there's so much power in this. in really creating vision, giving people a sense of hope. So I think I saw in some of your writings that you do something similar in some of your DEI work. So I just was curious, maybe about your workshops when you're trying to get people to change. Do you kind of use a methodology that puts a vision in front of them and then draw them to it, or like how do you do your practice?
You know what? I use a bunch of stuff.
Okay.
Everything I think happens for a reason, and so again, I prepared myself to be a rock star, but it wasn't in vain. I use all those rock star tactics. I perform to try to catch people's attention. I do poetry. I sing. I play the sax.
Yeah.
And ultimately, if someone asks me, what do you do? Because that's just the common question people ask. If I got to give them an elevator speech, which I won't because I don't ride elevators, but if I had to give them a quick speech, I'll say I'm a storyteller, and all of those tools are used to just really help tell a story. It was Dr. Derek Bell, the late Dr. Derek Bell, creator of critical race theory. He talked about the power of storytelling, and in critical race theory, storytelling is one of the components used for the research. You use stories as data points, so to speak. And he said, the power of stories is that a person can get caught up in the story and suspend their beliefs. You can bring people together closer with stories. And so I think the most powerful mechanism I have when I do workshops is not just telling my story and hoping someone can see a commonality, even though we look different, see a commonality in my story and their own, but also open it up for other people to tell their stories. I think we learn from one another's stories. And I think from stories, I think we learn. It's cliche-ish, but I believe it is one race, the human race. And so once we kind of start sharing those stories, we find out we have a lot of commonalities that just walking on the street, we wouldn't recognize that we had.
Amen. Agreed.
Well, let me ask you, where do you think we are as a nation on the matter of race? What encourages you, and where do you think our challenges are?
Well,
a small question.
I think we're very divided.
Yeah.
Obviously this is not 1920. It's not 1930. This is not, a birth of a nation being showed in the White House and the president saying this is the best movie he ever seen. And unfortunately, it's just so true that that's all Black men want to do is rape innocent white women. I mean, we're not in that era anymore, but we still have some work to do. And part of the problem, and this is just Kevin's opinion, it is just so heavily politicized. Everything about race is so heavily politicized. And so what you have a right and a left. And I mean, let's just think about it logically. If you take something and you pull it hard to the right and you pull it hard to the left, you're going to pull it apart in the middle. And I think this bipartisan system is pulling the country apart in the middle. And race is one of the casualties. Several casualties. Race is just one of many of the casualties. And so, I'll just bring up, most people are very critical of Trump because he does say some very racially insensitive things. And there's no ifs, ands, and buts about it. But at the same time, we can't just give Joe Biden a pass. We have to remember that in 1972, Joe Biden said, I will always be against forced busing because I would hate for my kids to attend schools in racial jungles. That came out of his mouth. We have to also remember that under the Clinton administration, more Black men were in prison than under 20 years of Bushes and Reagan. That's 8 Reagan and 12 Bush between the two Bushes combined. And who wrote the Clinton crime bill? Joe Biden. We have to also remember that in the 2008 primary, Joe Biden said about Obama when he was running against him, he said, this is the first time in American mainstream history that we have a Black guy who is clean, articulate, smart, and an overall good-looking guy. Well, you can go to Walmart and see Black men that fit that description, but he didn't have to do that. He got a chance to see Martin Luther King, the epitome of those things. And you're saying the first Black man that's clean, articulate, smart, and a good-looking guy that you ever seen in your life was Obama in 2008. So both parties have some racial issues. One of them is just more subtle. One smiles in your face and writes it in the law, and the other is orange on TV yelling it at you. But both have been harmful.
Tell us how you really feel. I want
Oh,
to segue this to Juneteenth. And I want you to just give your own definition of Juneteenth and what it means to our community for those of that may be watching that have no idea what we mean or what it means when we say that we'll be celebrating Juneteenth.
sure. I mean, the end of slavery is significant, and so Juneteenth represents that. That's not necessarily the day that the slavery ended, but that's the day that the final people, got that message that slavery ended. I think it's important to celebrate it because you have to think about it. People who look like some of us came here in chains, were robbed of our name. My name probably Harrison is probably a Irish name, I would assume. And I don't look Irish to me. Maybe I do to you. But robbed of our name, robbed of native traditions, customs, language, and just brought here and forced to do some horrible things beyond slavery. I mean, they used to have something called nigger barbecues where they would put a
Mm.
black person on a pit and they would roast them slowly until their body became so dehydrated that chunks of flesh would fall off of them. And then people would grab chunks of flesh and take pictures with chunks of flesh. This was a way certain people celebrated. Um, and so when you look at all of the things that Black people have overcome in this country, and still, despite that, have contributed just so many beautiful things. If you take all of the Black innovations out of this country, this place is really boring. You don't have jazz, blues, hip hop, open heart surgeries. You can't cure blue baby syndrome. I could go on and on. And so, whenever we can look back and celebrate something that's a turning point, because that's a turning point. I mean, you don't get to talk to Dr. Harrison in 2022 if Juneteenth doesn't happen in 1865.
Hmm.
And so we have to celebrate all those turning points. And there's so many other turning points and we still have a long ways to go. Hopefully, 25, 50 years from now, there's even more progress. But when we talk about freedom, are we fully free? No, we still have a lot of problems with police disparities, judicial system disparities, healthcare disparities, on and on and on. Wealth gaps that are not created because people don't want to pull themselves up by their own bootstraps. They were created by systemic oppression, home ownership, segregation, things like that. So we still have a long ways to go, but I'm definitely thankful for how far we've come, and I think of the many things that have contributed to that, Juneteenth is definitely one of the big ones. The Emancipation Proclamation is definitely, it was important. So yeah, we have to celebrate that. I think we need to celebrate it by more than barbecues. I think we should do something significant so that our kids understand it, so that they know why we're celebrating it. I think beer and barbecue probably is not the right celebration, but it's a work in progress.
That's how
So that
Americans celebrate everything.
true story, true
Right,
Beer and
story.
barbecue.
right, God.
And thing is, why would if you have a 10-year-old Black kid who can't wait to get fireworks to celebrate a holiday on the 4th of July that, as Frederick Douglass said, what to the slave is the 4th of July. If you have him excited about that, that's fine. He's an American. He should be proud of American traditions, but he should understand the racial connotations of that. And he should also be equally celebratory of his freedom, because July 4th was not that kid's freedom.
I have a question for all of you. I mean, I didn't grow up with this stuff. I grew up in rural Minnesota. I'm an import into Wichita, and so I'm curious, what is the history of Juneteenth in Wichita as far as, like, I mean, I know there are yearly celebrations now. Is that something that Wichita has a long history of, um, or do you all know kind of what the Wichita history of Juneteenth is?
I'll let someone else speak to it.
I'm giving that one all to you, Mr. Historian.
I don't really know. I know that the last several years, ever since Brandon and Danielle Johnson have taken it over, it has kind of gone to another level. A lot more
Okay.
exposure, a lot better programs and events, and so it's really become something special. The parade is amazing. It's getting better and better. But there have been some decent ones in the past, but they've kind of been hit and miss. I
Okay.
think part of the reason they've had a hard time, getting funding for it. And it seems like and I don't know the numbers, but just looking at it, it seems like it's funded pretty well now. I think there's a lot more, going back to DEI, there are companies in Wichita that have been in Wichita my whole life that all of a sudden have an interest in DEI. And that's a great thing. But these are companies that could have cared less probably about DEI when I was 15, 20 years old. And so I think you see some changes in mindsets that kind of help, because, obviously we have to have allyship. If we're going to move forward, we can't do it by ourselves. And so I think we have some allies that we may not have had previously. So we see a lot more exposure, and then making it a federal holiday, I think, doesn't hurt things as well. I think that adds to it.
Okay.
I would agree with you locally, and Kai, you can tell us about what type of celebrations go on in Austin. I think there's been a reawakening. I think people are thirsting for information, and that information is now being provided, and there is a thirst for coming together. I know that the pandemic had a lot to do with that, but I think that more people are willing to not only participate in Juneteenth activities, but also bring someone with them. So that's my invitation, Pastor Kyle, for you to participate in the activities that we have going on. I'll make sure that you're aware of some of those things so you can share it with your church as well.
That'd be great.
Yeah, so I was over here. I'd done a quick Google, but it looks like possibly in Wichita has been celebrated since the early 1900s. Is what it's saying. Again, just a quick Google. It's Google, so check it out for yourselves. I don't want to tell you that that's exactly what it is. But actually, here in Austin, Texas, if my historical readings are accurate, Austin, Texas is one of the earlier places that Juneteenth was actually celebrated here in Texas. We actually have a housing community here called Rosewood. It's believed to be the first site of the first location within Austin where Juneteenth was celebrated. So it's a nice house. Well, it's a housing community now. So they will have we'll have meetups, some things over there, but primarily on the 18th, we're going to be having the Juneteenth parade. I'm super excited. We've got our company in it. I've got a diverse group of folks joining us from the company to come experience it for the first time. We're going to be providing food and beverages, the whole nine, participating in an exhibition. So I'm super excited about Juneteenth this year, and really, really, I don't know, just proud of the work that's happening here in Austin. I mean, we have a long ways to go, but this parade also sponsors the Greater East Austin Youth Association, which provides summer camps and programs for children throughout the summer. So it's going to be a great opportunity to give back and grow our community. So, yeah.
Awesome. We got two final questions. One, before we give you a final word, Kevin, just what's the next, in your opinion, what's the next best thing that Black people can do to improve our status as American citizens?
Whew, man, that's a tough one. I spoke about Underground Railroads earlier, and of course, I was talking about actual physical freedom from slavery. But I think now we still are navigating through proverbial Underground Railroads pretty much in our day-to-day walks of life. And I think, looking for freedom in terms of, access to certain things, fair housing, healthcare equality, things of that nature. I think, those things, are still barriers that keep us from having full freedom, at least as is promised to us by the founding fathers of the country. And so definitely have to be informed, engaged citizens. Life is just not a spectator sport. You have to be in the game. And by being in the game, that means you can't just listen to whatever your favorite news is and accept that as the truth. You have to do your own research. You have to dig in, and you have to look at multiple sources. If you're reading only left newspapers, you got to read some right ones. If you're only looking at right news stations, you need to look at some left ones, and then form your own opinion, critical thinking, and then getting involved. I mean, if there are community events or community powwows or community conversations, realizing that your one voice does have power. that your one vote does have power. You know, I don't criticize anyone who doesn't vote, but if you don't vote, you can't talk to me. I won't have a conversation with you about the political process. I might love you. We can talk about how grass grows. We can talk about the coldest winter ever in Wichita. We can talk about our favorite basketball, football teams. But if you've exercised your right to remain silent on the political process, then you need to exercise that with me. I won't talk to you about it. But we have to be involved. We have to be informed. We have to be engaged. And we just have to trust the process. I mean, the process has been working up to this point. Are we where we need to be? No. Are we where we were? Absolutely not. I mean, this is, we don't experience the daily discomfort that we used to under the evil hand of racism. And so the things that have been put in place are working, but it's a process that takes time, and you have to just trust the process, and you have to also trust that you have to be a part of the process. And if we have too many sideline people that are spectators, sideline spectators, rather than participants, it slows the progress down.
Does that participation include investing? I know that you have a fervor for investing in our communities and keeping some of the neighborhoods Black owned. You talk about regentrification all the time. You want to add a little of that into your comment?
Yeah, I will. I think we have to stop accepting any and everything. I don't have any problem with any person of any nationality. However, we have two Middle Eastern restaurants selling fried chicken on 13th and Grove across the street from each other, and they can't keep chicken in stock. And I don't eat meat, but I went into one of the stores because it's a store, and they treat you terrible. I'm not saying that I shouldn't spend with you because you're in my neighborhood, but when I realize, and it's blatant to me, that the only reason you're in my neighborhood is that you see a value in my dollar that I don't see.
Mm.
I'm using me as Black people. I'm not saying as in Kevin. You see a value in my dollar that I don't see. You're building wealth for your family off of my dollar, and I allow you to do that even though you're not treating me very well. I mean, that's problematic to me. And so you can't blame a person for setting up shop and doing that. We have to blame ourselves for accepting it. I mean, if you don't shop there, they have one or two choices. They treat you with some dignity and respect. Because the man treated me crazy when I went in there, and I didn't do anything to deserve that. You treat us with dignity and respect, or you shut down. Those should be the only two options, but we don't demand that. And I think, well, I don't think I know this. I know we can't move into those same communities. We can't move into a Korean neighborhood and sell Korean products. We buy our Black hair care products from Koreans. We buy soul food from Middle Easterners. We buy our products from people that don't look like that, don't look like us. But we can't do that. That's not reciprocated. And that's because we've gotten to the point, and it's not 100% our own fault. I think, a lot of the things that we talked about, the red line and the segregation, I think we're just so beat down that we come to a point where we accept anything, but we have to quit accepting anything. Then when we quit accepting anything and we demand more, we get more, and then we start investing in ourselves as well. We quick to invest in everybody else, but a lot of times we don't invest in ourselves. I remember a long time ago, I was at Music and More. I love Mamie. I used to go there and buy all of my tapes. Wasn't even CDs, tapes.
Yes.
And I remember I was in there looking at records, and a man came in, and Mamie had bought a new Cadillac, and a man said, "Mamie, man, that sure is a nice Cadillac. When did you get that?" She said, "Oh, about a month ago." And I remember it bothered me, and I was maybe 19, 20. He said, "Man, I have to tell my kids to quit shopping here. Y'all bought a Cadillac off of this music." Now, she's right there pretty close to where these chicken places are, but we can't be jealous of each other. We invest in one another and let our dollar circulate through our community. We can build wealth. But if I'm mad at you because you bought a Cadillac and I stopped shopping with you, but that's okay. I can shop with somebody that doesn't look like me because I'm not jealous of him and his Cadillac and his kids that he's sending to college. That's our mindset. We just got to change. It's destructive, and it's just destroying us. So there you have it.
I think one of the things that I appreciate about you the most, Dr. Harrison, is your laid back, say it like it is way of dealing with things. I think that you can have a conversation on any spectrum and draw people into you. And I think it's important for both young and old people to be reminded that we do have value, that our dollar does speak, and it speaks extremely loudly, but that it takes us to begin to appreciate one another, wanting to see each other win. Before we can help anybody else, we have to help ourselves. So I appreciate the fact that you encourage people to invest in our communities, not just commercially, but also residentially. You're encouraging people to their first time you buy a home doesn't have to be the house that you live in. It could be the house that you invest in, and it can be in a lower economic neighborhood. Ensuring that neighborhoods that you and I grew up in don't leave our hands. And I don't think that there are many people in our age group that are having those conversations with people to let them know that you can do this as well. It's not that hard. So I appreciate that about you. But before we close, I want to give you a final comment on anything that you feel like needs to be shared within our community or without. I appreciate you being a director of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Although we've kind of had this conversation surrounding the African American perspective, I love the way that you don't allow yourself to be pigeonholed into any one thing with any one race. You know a little bit about it all, so I'll give you the floor.
Yeah, I just end by saying I said earlier that there's one race, the human race, and I said that's a little cliche-ish, but at the same time, I always say it because it speaks directly to who I am. My great 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 grandfather and his father were J.P. Mayfield Jr. and Sr., and they were Confederate white men, poor farmers who fought from South Carolina, Confederate in the Civil War. And so when I look in the mirror, I see both sides of the Civil War. Uh, I see slave blood, and I see white Confederate blood that tried to keep me in chains, all in the same body. And I think all of us, if we dig deep into who we are, we will be shocked. We're all everything that we probably dislike or are critical of. And so, with that in mind, I think the quicker that we see that, going back to the whole storytelling piece, the quicker that we see that we have commonalities, maybe some not quite as drastic as that, but the quicker we see that we have commonalities, I think we can really build a better world together. Right now, we're divided, and we're divided based off our imagination. 100% imagination. We have these stereotypes. I say we, I'm talking about myself when I point one finger this way, three and a thumb point back at me. But I do my best daily to try to check my biases, but we all have these biases and we operate from these biases, and we don't have real conversations and get to know one another. And until we kind of get past that, we'll continue to hate people for things that we just dreamed up, things that are just not real.
Exactly. So I want to, if Pastor Johnson was here, I think one of the things, thank you for that. Thank you for
Mhm.
that. I don't want that. I'm going to sit in that for just a second. If Johnson was here, he would say that as soon as you and Miss Ashley's book is ready, when it's ready to be published, when you're ready to put it out in the mainstream, we'd like for you to come back. More so, we'd like to meet Ashley and have you share your book with us. And maybe we'll have some children come on that have read it in advance to be able to give you a little bit of feedback. I think it's important the work that you do across the spectrum. I thank God for Claudette Harrison keeping you in some type of program or having you dream up something. You've enriched Wichita in so many ways and kept us entertained in so many ways. You've celebrated us in life, in marriages, and in death. And I appreciate that. Appreciate you for that. So keep on keeping on, my brother. You know, I'm always a phone call away. You need something. And I enjoy, he is the only man I know, people, before we close, that if we are at an event, he is a fact checker. If you are giving a speech, please dot your I's and cross your T's if Kevin Harrison is in the room, because he is going to Google and check in any way possible that
No, I'm not.
what you're selling is actually real and true. And you've enlightened me in that in so many different ways because I'm sitting there thinking about, oh wow, how awesome, and you're sending me snapshots of that's not the truth. So keep on waking people up, keep on sharing the word, and continue to do so boldly. And know that you have support even when you don't think that you do.
Thanks.
Any additional announcements, Pastor Kyle?
I will let you know. Our church is coordinating a youth gardening program just for kids to learn about getting their hands in the dirt and learn about nutrition and gardening. And we had our first one this last Saturday, but there's still availability if folks want to register. They can go to our website, journeywichita.com, and under what's happening or events or something, they'll find information on that. We would love to have anybody take part in that.
Awesome. I'm not too keen on getting my hands dirty, but I'll support in some
It's
other
for
way.
the kids. It's for the kids, though.
But you have to do it with them, right? Someone's doing it with them. But we'll definitely spread the word. And Kai, anything you've got going on that we should know about, we can support?
No, just trying to beat that Texas heat. If y'all have any theology questions, want to have a conversation about the church, any of that stuff, be sure to check out the podcast at Kai Green Speaks, and then the podcast with me and my good friend Keisha, the therapist. Black and that's bad. I forgot the name of the podcast, Black and Saved. So yeah, check us out over there for more faith-filled conversations about living this life and trying to be a Christian.
Trying to be a Christian.
Trying to be
trying to be trying. I'm trying.
You know me. I pick words for a reason.
Right. Exactly. It's hard out here. So I want to remind you that we know that in Wichita we are in a food desert. But if you have someone in your family or in your neighborhood, your neighbors that are needing meals, we are a site at St. Mark United Methodist Church. You can come between 8 and 8:45 for breakfast, and I believe it's 11 to 11:30 for lunch. Come into St. Mark on the lower level, and you'll see Sister Gina Johnson's beautiful face. They'll get you signed up and ensure that throughout the summertime you have a safe place to come and receive a meal. I know we're under a boiling water alert. So if you guys are struggling, you need water, reach out. That's what we are supposed to be reliable resources for one another. And if you can't call the church, who can you call? Now, that doesn't mean that we're always going to have what you need, but we will connect you with other resources. We thank you for being on with us this evening. I want to remind you that Sunday is not enough, and we want to do life with you. We want to share your highs and your lows. We had an awesome time celebrating our graduates last Sunday. If my son Anson was on, he would tell you it was off the chain. So join us at 10 o'clock this Sunday, whether online. We'd love to see you in the building. If not, join us online. I'm going to say that for Aaron and Marche Fleming Randall that are online. They tend to join us. They'll say they're at Bedside Baptist, but we'll accept you that way as well. So get into the word, get connected with a Bible-based church. As Dr. Harrison said, there are a lot of people that are in the business for notoriety and for sharing other than thus saith the Lord. So thank you for joining us this evening, and we'll see you soon.